Good evening and welcome to Cycle. On this program, we will give you the latest news on the economy and political situation in Mongolia. I'm your host, Andra Batar. Rio Tinto Group has offered to buy out Turkish Hill Resources Ltd for 2.7 billion in an attempt to gain more control of a giant copper mine it's developing in Mongolia. The number 2 mining company is looking to increase its exposure to the so-called future-facing commodities, the natural resources such as copper and nickel that are key for the green energy transition. A deal could also ease many of the problems at the flagship Untitled Growth project, where Rio has faced spiraling costs and long-running disputes with both the Mongolian government and Turkish Hill Resources. Earlier this year, Rio struck a deal with the government to start work on a long-delayed $6.9 billion underground expansion of Oyu Totl Copper after agreeing to write off $2.4 billion owed by the state. Rio already owns 51% of Turkish Hill Resources, which in turn holds a 2/3 share in Oyu Totl. The proposed transaction would enable Rio Tinto to work directly with the government of Mongolia to move the Oyu Totl project forward with a simpler and more efficient ownership and governance structure, Rio's chief executive officer Jakob Stausholm said in a statement on Monday. Rio said on Monday it was offering $34 Canadian a share to Turkish Hill's minority shareholders, a 32% premium to Friday's closing price. Rio said no agreement has been reached between the company and Turkish Hill Resources. The mining sector had largely turned away from big acquisitions after a series of deals of the height of the last commodities boom went spectacularly wrong. Excess cash has been returned to shareholders in massive dividends and buybacks. But as the global energy transition gathers pace, there's a growing recognition that deals will be essential to replace fossil fuels assets with mines that can produce the materials needed for decarbonization. In December, Rio agreed to buy a lithium mine in Argentina for $825 million, while rival BHP Group earlier this year bought a stake in a nickel project in Tanzania. For the deal to go through, Rio will need the support from a majority of Turkish Hill's minority shareholders. The miner has had a troubled relationship with Turkish Hill around how it will fund its share of the cost of developing the project. Rio has also drawn criticism from some of Turkish Hill's minority shareholders over the control it exerts over the company. After the statement, activist investor Pentwater Capital Management, the largest minority shareholder of Canada's Turkish Hill with a 10% stake, has rejected the $2.7 billion bid for the copper producer by Rio Tinto as too low. Rio fell as much as 4.2% in London trading. Mongolia's economy has been adversely impacted by China's COVID-19 policy because it is disproportionately dependent on its largest foreign trade partner, Beijing. As the world enters the 3rd year of the COVID-19 pandemic, Mongolia's economy has improved since last April as businesses have reopened, but China has maintained its border closed under its zero-COVID policy, according to the International Forum for Rights and Security, a research think tank located in Canada. China has enacted a harsh strategy that includes mandatory quarantining state facilities, rigorous lockdowns and mass testing. Mongolia has also been affected by China's COVID policy. National Statistical Office Division Head Tsewenjao Lhana sums up Mongolia's precarious economic situation as disproportionately dependent on our biggest foreign trade partner, China. Since Mongolia became part of Belt and Road Initiative, investments by China has increased even more, and China has also granted loans. Trade is one aspect of China and Mongolia's relationship. China is Mongolia's biggest importer of minerals. According to a Canada-based think tank, within China, ethnic Mongolians are facing a cultural crackdown. Schools in Inner Mongolia teach in Mongolian except the subjects of Mandarin and other foreign languages. China is deliberating on changing its education policy to 3 subjects, namely history, morality and law, and language and literature to be taught in Mandarin, the think tank added. Reports were met with widespread protests by students. Thousands of arrests were made and there were a few suicides as well. Ethnic Mongolians are not the only ones facing suppression of their culture, language and traditions. Tibetans and Uyghurs are facing the same. Earlier, Mongolia's relations with China received a blow when the Dalai Lama planned to visit Mongolia to attend a convention. China strongly opposed the visit and threatened Mongolia to cut off access to its ports. Ultimately, the Mongolian government cancelled the visit. With a unique value proposition to tourists, Mongolia's tourism sector has substantial growth potential, but also faces key constraints in air transport and sector coordination, according to the World Bank's new study on Mongolia's tourism sector. The study, entitled Fostering Inclusive Tourism Development in the Aftermath of COVID-19, analyzes the performance of the Mongolian tourism sector and policy options based on a data-driven economic modeling approach. With a unique value proposition to tourists, Mongolia's tourism sector has substantial growth potential, but faces key constraints in air transport and sector coordination, according to the World Bank's new study on Mongolia's tourism sector. Mongolia's tourism sector has been severely impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, and its full potential is yet to unfold. The country has an abundance of strong niche products for leisure tourism, linked to its diverse nature, nomadic lifestyle, culture, and historical legacy, said Andriy Mikhnev, World Bank Country Manager for Mongolia. This new study aims to help the government identify policy priorities for a more inclusive and sustainable tourism sector. Tourism is an important contributor to Mongolia's economy and accounted for 7.2% of GDP, 6.8% of total exports, and 7.6% of total employment in 2019, which was the best year ever before collapsing in 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Relative to comparators in Eurasia as well as the countries outside of Eurasia with similar geographic features and/or tourism offerings, Mongolia has been losing market share over the last decade. However, leisure tourism has continued to expand while businesses travel has declined. Leisure tourists spend less time in Mongolia comparing with similar tourist markets. The government aims to develop sustainable and inclusive tourism and make Mongolia the international destination for nomadic culture and tourism. This may require prioritizing segments and markets with highest value potential before increasing the number of foreign tourist arrivals, the report points out. The lack of resources allocated for infrastructure development and a protectionist aviation policy impede sector development, according to the enterprise survey of tourism companies conducted in the beginning of 2021. Furthermore, the tourism industry representatives acknowledged policy and sector coordination issues to be among the top issues facing the sector, including the lack of centralized marketing support, national tourism policy implementation, and coordination. Mongolia's tourism sector has suffered a loss of 1.5 trillion MNT due to COVID-19, with around 1,600 companies and 88,000 jobs put at risk. We are facing an unprecedented challenge of retaining experienced professionals in the sector and minimizing the impact of the economic downturn. The comprehensive analysis prepared by the World Bank at this critical time, when we needed a strategy to revive the tourism sector, will assist us in assessing the current situation and defining the appropriate measures and policy, said the Minister of Environment and Tourism of Mongolia, Mr. Batirtang. The economic ramifications of Russia's situation in Ukraine and the West's imposition of heavy sanctions on Moscow in response to it are starting to unsettle Mongolia. 4 days after Russia invaded Ukraine on February 24th, the governor of the Bank of Mongolia, told reporters that the national lender posted a $4.3 billion in reserves as of the start of 2022, and that the reserves were more than enough to cover 7 to 8 months. Bank customers were blocked from making foreign payments of more than 4 million MNT and prevented them from obtaining more than $1,000 per day in some banks. Customers were informed by their banks that the central bank had set limits on foreign exchange transactions. However, on March 21st, Bank of Mongolia provided a statement in which it said there was no limit placed on foreign exchange. It stated the Bank of Mongolia has not imposed any limits on foreign exchange transactions. It is misleading for the managers of these banks to convince their clients that the Bank of Mongolia has placed such limits. The Bank of Mongolia will send a warning to the banks that have decided to restrict foreign exchange. The Bank of Mongolia suggests that individual banks may have set their own limits on the amount of dollars that can be withdrawn, taking into account their internal reserves. Whatever the facts here, there is no doubt that the Ukraine crisis is putting Mongolia's economy to the test. Inflation has hovered around 13% since January, and in February it topped 14%. The central bank said in early January that inflation would move down as soon as exports picked up again, but China's strict zero-COVID policy continues to make it difficult for Mongolia to ship minerals and coking coal to its giant neighbor, putting a big dent in the country's economic performance. Since the start of the Ukraine war, the MNT has dramatically depreciated from 2,842 MNT to the US dollars to 2,910. Given global price hikes, the central bank is now examining the next step it could take to ensure that the national currency does not depreciate further. It remains adamant that it does not want to deploy reserves to strengthen the tugrik. Some foreign exchange outlets have stopped selling dollars or are selling for at least 3,100 MNT. There are also tales of people swapping huge sums of rubles for USD. After the conflict broke out and Russia's ruble sank in the face of the sanctions response, some Mongolian economists called for the exchange of rubles to be stopped, but Bank of Mongolia did not issue an ordinance. The central bank, though, has made it clear that the exchange of rubles in the country has increased since the invasion. It said, if we look to the average amount of the ruble transactions from 2019 to the present, a maximum of $30 million in rubles has been used for payments and exchanges in the country on a monthly basis. A total of $92 million worth of ruble transactions were made from the beginning of this year till March 18th. Also within this time, the amount of rubles purchased amounted to $4.2 million. This shows that the amount of rubles bought by banks on the domestic market is much lower than the amount sold. Seebachthorn's geographical indication is registered in the European Union. In November 2019, the Mongolian National Chamber of Commerce and Industry and the Association of German Chambers of Commerce and Industry intensified their efforts to register Seebachthorn geographical indications in the European Union. PGI certification is granted to select agricultural and food products that have specific geographical origin and a distinct reputation for quality, emphasizing the relationship between the name of the region and the name of the product originating from that region. The registration of Seebachthorn geographical indications in the European Union will help protect the geographical indication of Seebachthorn in the European Union member states and prevent and stop the sale of counterfeit products. It also has the advantage of increasing the income of local Seebachthorn growers and producers, supporting sustainable business, maintaining the unique taste and quality due to the environment and climate, creating a new tourism channel and using quality and standard products for consumers. In 2016, the registration of Seebachthorn geographical indications in the European Union was started with the support of the Intellectual Property Office, the Seebachthorn Geographical Indications Association, and the French Embassy. From 2019, the SEQUA project team of the Mongolian National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the Seebachthorn Producers Association, and the German Association of Chambers of Commerce and Industry will continue to work together and achieve the above results. Protected geographical indications protect the registered products from misuse or imitation of their brand name and provide customers with a guarantee of the true origin of the product. These rules ensure that all producers in the given geographical area have collective rights over their product as long as certain requirements are met. By registering Seebachthorn grown in Ost province as a product with a specific geographical origin and reputation, local producers can introduce their products to a wider audience and export them to the European market. The certification proves that Seebachthorn grown in Ost province is a specific unique product. It's believed that we have enough resources for exporting Seebachthorn products. Rather than exporting unprocessed Seebachthorn, it's more profitable to export value-added products. We believe that Mongolia grows $10 million of Seebachthorn each year. Ost province Seebachthorn producers harvest 40% of their berries from wild bushes and 60% from cultivated bushes. Annually, 800 to 1,000 tons of Seebachthorn are harvested from 600 hectares. Currently, we are implementing a self-funded project in Ost province to open a berry processing factory. With the factory's launch, it will be possible to process 1,000 tons of Seebachthorn annually. It will allow exports to South Korea and create jobs for 40 people. With support from the Association of German Chambers of Commerce and Industry, the province opened its first jam factory last year. The jam factory has a daily output of around 10,000 units of product for the domestic market. Now let's take a look at other economy news that happened in recent days. The Deputy Minister of Economy and Development, Narentsokht, received a delegation of the Asian Development Bank led by Teresa Ko, Director General of the ADB's East Asia Department, on March 15th. During the meeting, the Deputy Minister provided information on the scope and activities of the new ministry and exchanged views on further cooperation between the two organizations. Mrs. Teresa Ko introduced ADB's short-term investment plans, projects, programs and financing, and gave information on how ADB-funded projects in 2022 and 2023 are aligned with the new revival policy of the government of Mongolia. In addition, ADB plans to focus on the priority areas of the government of Mongolia in the post-pandemic economic recovery, and in that context, has proposed to cooperate with the Ministry of Economy and Development to improve border port infrastructure, diversify the economy, and promote green growth and climate change. The parties agreed to cooperate effectively in those areas. At the end of the meeting, Deputy Minister Narentsokht thanked ADB for the successful implementation of investment and loan projects in Mongolia over the past 30 years, and the parties agreed to further expand relations and work closely. The average wage and salary is calculated from the report of the General Authority for the Social Insurance. According to this report, 719.3 thousand employees were working in 46.3 thousand enterprises in the fourth quarter of 2021. The number of employees increased by 27.7 thousand from the same period of the previous year and by 6.8 thousand from the previous quarter. The fourth quarter of 2021, the median wage was 1,068,000 MNT among 719.3 thousand persons that have paid social insurance. The median wage increased by 75.1 thousand MNT or 7.6% from the previous quarter. The monthly average wage and salary per employee was 1.4 million MNT, increased by 110,000 MNT or 8.3% from the same period of the previous year, and increased by 103.1 thousand MNT or 7.7% from the previous quarter. In terms of industrial classification of all economic activities, the monthly average wage and salary of employees working in the mining and quarrying sector was the highest at 3.2 million MNT, whereas monthly average wages and salaries of employees working in the accommodation and food service activities was the lowest at 967.9 thousand MNT. Compared to 2015, the monthly nominal average wages and salaries increased by 65.6%, while the monthly real average wage and salary increased by 16.9% in the fourth quarter of 2021. By making public services available digitally, the quality of services being provided for entities will improve. Concerning this issue, the European Mongolian Chamber of Commerce and Industry is implementing a capacity-building project for Mongolian small-medium enterprises to export their products to the European market with financing from the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. In the framework of this project, a roundtable meeting was organized at the Mongolian National Chamber of Commerce and Industry under the topic Digitalization of Government Services and Trade Finance. At the roundtable meeting, the sides discussed small and medium enterprises' pressing issues in exporting, especially financing support for export, as possible solutions. Representatives of the Bank of Mongolia and the Development Bank of Mongolia introduced the bank's policy priorities as well as the implementation of export financing support. During the event, Bank also introduced their trade finance services for small and medium enterprises. The meeting was attended by officials of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Digital Development and Communications, representatives of the Bank of Mongolia, the Development Bank of Mongolia, the Customs General Administration, the SME Development Fund, and Bank, as well as those involved in the project, business owners, and the Euro Chamber representatives. At its plenary session, the State Great Hall has extended the effective period of the law on prevention, combat, and the reduction of social and economic impacts of COVID-19 until the end of December 31, 2022. In order to ensure effective implementation of the law and provide support to households amid the pandemic, the Bank of Mongolia, in cooperation with the corresponding organizations and banks, decided to make deferrals on the subsidized mortgage loans, principal and interest repayment again until the end of December 31, 2022, with a view to alleviate the financial hardship posed by the COVID-19 pandemic on businesses and individuals who have been falling behind their loan dues. The government of Mongolia, together with the Bank of Mongolia and commercial banks, started fulfilling mortgage repayment deferral requests in April 2020 regarding the borrower's request and to extend the loan agreement term without increasing the amount of the remaining payment. Upon the decision to make deferrals on loan repayment and their interest, the Bank of Mongolia has made temporary changes to regulations followed by commercial banks on their asset classifications and the requirements for their operations, allowing the banks not to change their borrowers' credit ratings caused by failures on loan repayment. Well, that's all for this cycle. We'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Have a nice weekend. Goodbye.